It is so good to have everyone with us here this evening, and thank you for all those that are live streaming. I was just checking our website, and we right now have 133 cities around the world from 6 different countries live streaming with us right now. So let's say hi to all the live streamers from around the world. Every Shabbat, I mention that the United Nations has 195 members. If you Google UN member nations, there's 195 nations belong to the UN. You go to our website, you will see there are 209 nations coming to our website hearing the gospel. I mean, literally, the Torah is going to all of the nations. I have a PowerPoint. All right, tonight we have a guest speaker, Avi Lipkin. Let's give him a big hand. How many here have heard Avi Lipkin speak before? Okay, how many here have never heard Avi Lipkin speak? Okay, Avi, take a look here. Here's all the hands. The vast majority have not heard you ever speak before. Let me find out, how many of you, is this your first time coming here to this facility? All right, we got a lot of visitors here. We welcome you. Just so you know, I'm Pastor Mark Biltz of Shaddai Ministries. We do not own this building. We just rent here. But every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, we have services right here. You could come and join us. You can also live stream it at home in your jammies. But we prefer you right here on Saturday mornings. We have a lot of fun here. We'd love to have you come. I'm so excited to have Avi Lipkin here. Avi, if you would come on up, let's give him a big hand. He's got his own mic here, but let's stand and let's open with a word of prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we just thank you so much for this time that we can come together, all united, Jews and Gentiles, and just learn of you and be more cognizant of what's going on in the world today and how it can affect our lives. And we just pray right now that you would give us eyes to see, ears to hear, hearts to understand what you need your body to realize in this time. And we just thank you in Yeshua's name. And everybody says, amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to have you.
Good to be here. I appreciate it so much when the pastor gives me 5 hours to speak. You know I'm just joking. The good news and the bad news, it's an hour and a half. But I will try to take different parts of my 26 hours of teaching and share it tonight. The first thing I wanted to share, how many people who know me know the testimony about the Dallas Council on World Affairs? I see about 12 hands. Okay, so you definitely need to hear. This is an appropriate testimony to start the message with. It is a testimony which is in all 6 of my books. It's the only testimony in all 6 of my books. And even though I'm Jewish, this is a Christian testimony. And it is a testimony that applies to all Christians in America, Canada, Europe, Latin America, Asia, Africa, wherever. I know all of you have your eyes set on Israel. You're all watching to see, will there be quiet? Will Hamas start again with another barrage of missiles at our civilian population, hoping that the Israelis will counterattack and kill as many Palestinians as the Hamas wants Israel to kill? And you all know that Israel does not want to kill Palestinians. I appeared on Israeli TV, Channel 1, in October of 2006, and I said on TV, Israeli TV, that all the nations, all the Arab nations hate the Palestinians, that there's only one nation on the face of the earth that really loves the Palestinians, and that's the Jews of Israel. We live with the Palestinians. We eat and drink with them. We work with them. We fellowship with them. They do not like the PLO. They do not like Hamas. These Palestinians want to live in peace alongside us, the vast majority of them. And you probably know that 85% of them have Jewish DNA. How many people know that they have Jewish DNA? The Palestinians have Jewish DNA. They were forced to convert to Islam over the centuries. Some of them have even kept the phylacteries and the prayer shawls of their great-grandparents. We do not want to kill the Palestinians. We want to live in peace with them. And so you're all wondering about Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I want to tell you, my opinion of Netanyahu is he's the right man in the right place at the right time. And though I consider myself arch right-wing in Israel, but I support Netanyahu in what he's doing. And I have fights very often with my fellow right-wingers, and I say to them, you do not know what the Prime Minister of Israel has to contend with. And so I'm starting now with the Dallas Council on World Affairs. What I'm going to do in the next hour and a half is probably give you about 16 different testimonies from different parts of my message, but they all interconnect. Because the problem is not only Islam. And we're not doing the 5 deceptions of Islam tonight. That's my ABC message, and I'm already behaving with you guys like you're going for your 2nd and 3rd degrees here at college. So we're not doing the ABCs. I think, how many people heard of the harlot riding the dragon? Okay, so I say yes, Islam is the dragon, Islam is the devil. I do have a 3-year jail sentence in Switzerland for saying it. How many people know I have a 3-year jail sentence in Switzerland for saying it? And that Islam is not a religion, Islam is a criminal psychosis bent on the depopulation of the human race, including the Muslims. And I have a very good joke for you as we go along. I have a lot of jokes for you as we go along. But there's also something known as the harlot. And I define the harlot as the one world government. How many people heard of the one world government? So the Dallas Council on World Affairs is going to deal with the harlot. I'm already going to the next stage. And by the end of the evening, God willing, I'm going to show you how Islam is going to be defeated very soon. It's not going to be defeated by the Jews and the Christians. It's going to be defeated by the one world government. The harlot is going to dismount from the serpent, from the dragon, and then behead the dragon. The Antichrist is not who you think I might be referring to. I won't mention his name. I mean, he is Salesman of the Month, but he's not the Antichrist. I believe the Antichrist will come out of that one world government system that defeats Islam. So this whole message now is going to go in the direction of the defeat of Islam very soon in our time. Okay, but first I want to start to define the harlot. I was born in 1949, made Aliyah in 1968, and I came to the United States for the first time as an Israeli army spokesman, of course privately, but I was an Israeli army spokesman, in November, December of 1990. November, December 1990 was Desert Shield. How many people remember Desert Shield? Okay, you all remember that? January, February, March of 91 was Desert Storm. And so I came here in November, December, and as an Israeli army spokesman, I had been debriefed by our commanders in Israel as to exactly what was going to happen with Saddam Hussein in Kuwait. And these things happened exactly as I said. So when I came back a second time to the States in 1991, in April, everybody said, Avi's a prophet, Avi's a prophet. I said, I'm not a prophet, I just listen to my commanders. As a little sidebar, you know, I was predicting 9/11 years before it happened, and everyone said, this Avi's crazy, you know, the Muslims are great people. By the way, the Muslims are great people, but the 19 terrorists on 9/11 were Muslims. And after it happened, Avi's a prophet, Avi's a prophet. I said, I'm not a prophet, I listen to my wife. My wife, Rachel, monitors the broadcasts of the Arabs on radio, TV, computers, newspapers. And for years, the Muslims were saying, those twin trade towers have to come down. And we're going to take their planes and we're going to crash them into the World Trade Center. So I put it in my book in 1997. Am I a prophet? No, listen to my wife. Okay. And a lot of what I'm going to share tonight is based on things that my wife picks up in Arabic, which are going to be very surprising for many of you. I'll start with one two quotes, and then I'm going to get into the Dallas Council on World Affairs. 30 years ago, Rachel was listening to them in Arabic, and the Saudis were saying, even if it takes us 150 years, we are going to make America a Muslim country. And my wife said, these people are dreaming. How could you make the greatest Christian country on earth a Muslim country? Now, after 30 years, my wife listens to them, the same people, and they're saying, we thought it was going to take 150 years. We were wrong. It's only going to take 30 years to make America a Muslim country. America is now being made a Muslim country. We're going to discuss this as we go along. So one of the things I wanted to share is, how did we get to this situation? How do we get to a situation in which the gates, the floodgates are open, and the Muslims are coming into this country in the tens of millions? Okay. So April 1991, I come back to the States for my second visit as a lecturer, and I get a call from a PR woman, desperate call. She heard me in November of 90. She said, get on the next plane to Dallas. You're speaking tomorrow before the Dallas Council on World Affairs. I didn't know what that was. I thought it was an economic forum. And my Christian friends in Texas, I called them and said, what's this Dallas Council business? And they said to me, that's the one world government. And you better be careful, because if you get in their way, they're going to kill you. Because their God is mammon. Their God is money. And they won't let anything get in the way of their money. This is a very key part of my message tonight. And this is 23 years ago, and nothing has changed. It's only gotten worse. But it's the same reality of 23 years ago. God has a great sense of humor. I was told, that I was a pinch hitter. I was being brought down 24-hour notice to Dallas. These Dallas Council people, they prepare their meetings a year, 2 years in advance. So what does it mean, get on the next plane? I was replacing Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin had been contracted to give 4 lectures in Dallas. He gave 2 lectures, and the 3rd lecture he didn't show because he had some alcohol to drink, and he was a severe alcoholic. And they put him straight on his plane back to a sanitarium in Russia. And the 4th night was paid for also. They needed a speaker. And this PR woman succeeded in convincing them to bring me. So, number one, God had to make Boris Yeltsin so drunk that the doors would open for Avi Lipkin to come down. And that's only half the story. The other half of the story, when I got there, General Latham, retired, says to me, so tell me, sir, what's it like to be a general in the Israeli army? I said, General? He said, are you General A. Lipkin, Chief of Staff of the Israeli army? You see, he thought he was getting the Chief of Staff, Amnon Lipkin Shachak. I said, no, I'm Lieutenant A. Lipkin of the Army Spokesman's Office. But for people from Dallas, Amnon, Avi, it's all the same. So you see, God has a sense of humor. And I said, I'm going to give you guys a lecture you're never going to forget. And the truth is, they liked it so much, they actually did invite me back. I did not go, though, because the Israeli government told me not to go, because I was supposed to debate with Professor Edward Said of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and the Israeli government said you cannot talk to terrorists, while Rabin, Peres, and Begin were in Oslo negotiating the Oslo agreements with the terrorists. Okay. By the way, are they still terrorists? Yes, they're still terrorists. It's okay. God's in control. So I got up, I delivered my message, as an Israeli army spokesman is trained to do. And I said to them, I thought they were Christians. I really didn't understand. It did not sink in that these were not Christians. They were dressed with tie and jacket. It was like Sunday best, They looked like Americans. They talked like Americans. Texas, you think they're all Bible people. And they said to me, I said to them, Israel is a very small country. And to show you how small Israel is, Jesus walked from Nazareth down to the Sea of Galilee. That's about a 3-4 hour hike. Actually, if you go to Israel today, there's something called the Jesus Trail. You know, you're up in Nazareth, you see the Sea of Galilee, it's a downhill all the way. It's a nice walk, it's a 3-4 hour walk. Has anyone done the Jesus Trail? Well, you have a challenge now, Pastor Mark. So the Israeli government promotes the Jesus Trail. You can walk from Nazareth down to the Sea of Galilee. What was the Sea of Galilee? The fishers. And from there, Jesus walked down the Jordan River. You know, we didn't have buses or taxis in those days. You walked along the river. And he gets to Jericho, and he baptizes with John the Baptist, who, by the way, was not a Baptist. And after Jesus baptizes in Jericho, he has a 5-hour hike up to the temple in Jerusalem. And you see Jerusalem from Jericho. If you've been to Israel, you see it, how small the country is. My house is in Kedar, which is very close to Jerusalem. And we see Amman, the capital of Jordan, straight across the Jordan Valley. It's only about 30 miles. We see the lights of Jordan at night. We see Amman during the day. It's such a small territory. And if you're a terrorist coming across the Jordan, you can jog up to Jerusalem in 3 hours. If you're driving legal, it's 20 minutes to Jerusalem, whether it's a car or a tank or a half-track. And if you're flying in an attack aircraft from Amman, it's 3 minutes to bomb Jerusalem and 3 minutes more to bomb Tel Aviv and 5 minutes to be back in Amman sipping Turkish coffee. That's how small Israel is. This was my message as an army spokesman. And then I got into a little politics, and I said to them, Israel was attacked again and again and again, and Israel took Sinai 3 times, and Israel took Golan twice. And the UN says in its resolutions 242 and 338 that Israel must hand over land for peace, which is what your media does tell you. What your media does not tell you is that the sentence continues. It says Israel will give land for peace, but Israel will negotiate with its neighbors, its Arab neighbors, for new borders which are secure, recognized, and defensible. So if we have to negotiate with our neighbors for new borders which are secure, recognized, and defensible, does that mean that we go back to the June the 5th, 1967 borders? We don't go back. And the UN is no friend of Israel, but the UN recognized reality in that stage. And yet the U.S. administrations of the last 50 years, all they do is talk about June 5th, 1967. I believe it was Henry Kissinger who called those borders Auschwitz extermination camp borders. The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff visited Israel in 1968, and they said under no circumstances should you give back Judea and Samaria or Gaza or the Golan. And yet the U.S. government, the State Department, and I want you to know, I'm not going to attack Democrats, I'm not going to attack Republicans, I'm going to attack everybody. Let me ask you a rhetorical question. Are we supposed to be respecters of men? I mean, we have a role model. Okay. That was my message. We had dinner. I was putting my jacket on to leave, and the august people of the Dallas Council on World Affairs said to me, "Where are you going? We're not finished with you yet." "You worked in Prime Minister Shamir's office?" I said, "Yes." "Well, we want you to take a message back to Prime Minister Shamir. First thing we want you to know, Avi, you're a good speaker for Israel. You know why? Because you're an American-born Jew. You don't speak with a funny Israeli accent. We understand everything you're trying to say to us." You know how Israelis have a funny accent? They said, we in Dallas don't like funny accents. We don't like Jewish accents, Arab accents, Russian of Yeltsin accents, Queen's English from Oxford. And you speak like a Yankee from New York. But you speak clear English, so you're a good speaker for Israel. But you know what your problem is? You don't know realities. We're going to teach you realities tonight. The Dallas Council on World Affairs is going to teach you realities. Reality number one, Israel is all alone. Okay, remember, this is April 1991. Who is president? George Herbert Walker Bush. This is not Democrat now. This is a Republican. And he says, they said to me, these were Jimmy Baker people. Remember James Baker III. And they said to me, Israel's all alone. America is tired of paying for Israel's wars. You Jews are going to make peace with the Arabs whether you like it or not. And you're not going to give them 91% of the land, which was Sinai, or 93%, which is Sinai and the Golan. You're going to give them the whole 9 yards. because you're all alone. And we don't care about UN resolutions 242 and 338 calling for new borders. And the second thing they said to me, and if you don't leave tonight with any other message other than what I'm going to say in the next sentence, then you've already gotten something very important. They said the second thing is there's only one thing that made America great, and that's the barrel of oil. The steady price of oil, steady supply of oil, and we're not going to let the Jews get in the way of that. Is that clear? Now, I was in complete shell shock because I was new at this lecture circuit business. There were two Christian couples there. They were my guests that night. They had brought me to hear Marlon Maddox. How many people remember Marlon Maddox? Point of view. Well, that's the Dallas, among my many sins, I'm very much in love with Texas, and I'm always in Texas. And Marlon Maddox, a very famous personality in the South. He had a fundraiser in November of 1990, and Eric Gustafson was my host that night, so I invited him as my guest that night, and he was shaking like a tuning fork when they said what made America great was the barrel of oil. And he got up with my permission and looked at these people in the room and said, "You say what made America great was the barrel of oil? You should be ashamed of yourselves. What made America great was not the barrel of oil. What made America great was Jesus Christ." And you have to remember, I was the only Jew in the room. And I want you to know, I did not really like Jesus Christ very much that night. As soon as I heard that testimony, the lights went on, I fell in love with Jesus. I'm still a Jew, by the way. I'm not a Christian. But I learned a very important message that night. And I thought to myself, just think for a moment, if the President of the United States in World War II had been a Christian, would we have lost 6 million Jews in World War II? If you had had a conservative president, a Christian president, not a socialist Democrat, we might have saved 1 million, 2 million Jews. All the United States had to do, all Britain had to do, all Russia had to do was to send one bomber and bomb one trestle of the railroad track going to Auschwitz. The trestle would have taken a week, 2 weeks to fix. By 1944, it was clear the Nazis were losing. It would not have affected the course of the war. And the President of the United States and all the leaders knew exactly what was happening at the gas chambers. And so I want to say some pretty wild things now. I see another Holocaust coming to Israel, and it's not going to be only the Muslims threatening Israel, it's going to be the United States and the West too. Unless there is a Christian revolution in America, unless you have a Christian Washington and a Christian president and a Christian Congress, and bring America back to its senses from the great times of its creation, America has lost its Christianity. Okay. And so I don't want to talk in lofty terms, but I want to say that I feel that the Christians have to have a revival in America for Israel to have a survival. I'm going to be a little rude now. How many people know who Stephen Harper is? I see, I'm counting maybe 10 hands. The whole group, I'm watching, 10 hands. Stephen Harper is the Prime Minister of Canada. And he's a Christian. And he's Israel's best friend. God bless Canada. And so I took a vow in April of 1991 that I was going to work for a Christian revival in America. Yes, I'm a Jew. Yes, I have an ulterior motive. The ulterior motive is to save Israel from destruction at the hands of the enemies of God. And America has to be saved from the enemies of God. And I think it was Jesus who said, did you have to choose? Either you serve the Lord or you serve Mammon. Mammon is a very Hebrew word. We say mammon. Mammon in Hebrew means money. These people of Dallas, they serve money. Money is their God. Washington, for the last 100 years, has ceased to be a Christian town. Washington, D.C. is now a money city. It is a power city, an oil city. Who has the money? Who has the oil? Who has the power? Islam. And so if you don't believe in God, if you don't serve the Lord, if you serve Mammon, you're going to serve Islam. And if you're going to serve Islam, Israel will be sacrificed again, just as it was in World War II. Never again, God willing, but it's not just enough to say it. You know, we Jews were Israelites once. In Egypt, we were slaves with the black people. The blacks are our brothers and sisters. And we know what slavery is. It's a horrible thing. And America had a great president by the name of Abraham Lincoln who banished slavery with the Emancipation Declaration. They never heard of Abraham Lincoln in Africa. Slavery is still big time. Blacks are being slaughtered in Africa in the millions. I still haven't heard about the 300 girls that were kidnapped. Where is the world? Where is the outrage? In World War II, the Muslims came to the Nazis. Muslims supported the Nazis. And they said, if you kill the Jews, we're going to be with you. On the other hand, the Allies, they didn't want the Arabs to go with the Nazis, so they made a deal with the Muslims too. The Muslims said, if you deny the Jews visas to escape from Nazi Europe, we're with you. So there was a lethal combination. Hitler and the Nazis did the killing, but the British, the Canadians, and the Americans denied Jews visas. How many people remember the ship to St. Louis? That's another challenge. I see less than half the hands went up. The movie, the St. Louis, is extremely critical to understand. St. Louis was a passenger ship, a Nazi-German passenger ship. And it was carrying 900 Jews in May of 1939 to Cuba, not to the U.S. And Breckinridge Long, who was the Undersecretary of State for visas under Roosevelt, calls the Cuban government and says, cancel the visas, send the ship back. So the ship turned around, went back to Florida. The U.S. Coast Guard circled the ship. It stopped in 3 different places off the Florida coast, hoping that the Jews could disembark. And the Coast Guard made sure to it that nobody got off that ship. Then the ship went past the Canadian maritime provinces. Hundreds of pastors in Canada signed a petition to Mackenzie King, Prime Minister of Canada, let the kids off the ship, have mercy on the kids. And Mackenzie King said, one Jew is one Jew too many. The ship went back to Antwerp in Belgium. The war had already broken out by then, but the Germans had not yet invaded the Low Countries, in other words, Belgium, Holland. They were in the process of gobbling up Poland. Within a few months, they took Belgium, Holland, where all these Jews were, and 800 to 900 died in the Holocaust. And you know the story. You know that there were 7 million Jews behind Nazi lines, 6 million died. And I said to the people of the Dallas Council on World Affairs, are you saying to me Israel's going to be sacrificed for a barrel of oil? And they said, yes, now you got it. Take that message back to Shamir. Israel's going to be sacrificed. Now put yourself in my place. When you see Christians saying what made America great was Jesus Christ, meaning God, the Bible, Israel, and you see people who serve Mammon who sacrifice Israel and are going to do it again, with whom are you going to cast your destiny? So my destiny is with the Christians. And I want you to know, it's not really the message tonight. I'm watching my clock. I don't even know what I'm going to say in the next hour. I'm going to say a lot of things. But one of the things, if I had 2 hours, I would just talk about the Bible Block Party. How many people know I'm forming a Judeo-Christian party to run for office in Israel? I see about 30 hands. I'm forming a Judeo-Christian, in Hebrew it's called the Old Testament Party, because Jews and Christians agree on the Old Testament. In English, we call it the Bible Block Party. The Christians of Israel are 8%. There's not one representative in the Knesset yet. And I'm hoping that in 2 years from now, when we have our next elections, I will lead this new party, which I'm forming in January, February, and half of my candidates will be Jews, and half of my candidates will be Christians, and it'll be Jew, Christian, Jew, Christian, Jew, Christian. Every 40,000 votes, the next person on the list gets in. And by the end of the evening, you're going to understand that very soon there are going to be millions and millions of immigrants to Israel coming from the West. And a lot of them are Jews married to Christians, meaning the Christians are going to move with them. You know that the intermarriage rate in the United States is 71%. How many people know this? For every 100 Jews, 71 are going to marry Christian spouses. I don't know if you knew that or not. And when the Muslims come to kill the Jew, they have to kill the Christian spouse. And they have to kill the children of the intermarriage. And they're all going to go home to Israel. So my party will be the biggest party in the Israeli government. You know I really shouldn't tell jokes, but this joke, many times God uses humor to get the message across. So I'm going to tell you a quick joke. You know, how many people saw My Big Fat Greek Wedding? Okay, my favorite movie, I want you to know. And this Greek girl comes to her dad and says, "So Daddy, can I marry the guy, this American guy?" And he thinks, "No, now go eat something." How many people remember that? Go eat something. Jews are like that too. We're very cliquey. We want our boys and girls to marry within the faith. So there's a joke. This Jewish guy has 3 sons. The first son comes home, "Daddy, I met the girl of my dreams. What's her name?" "O'Malley." That's not a Jewish name. "I don't care. I love her. She's the greatest woman in the world." "Okay, son, you have my blessing. Go in peace." "Please, God, I have 2 sons left. Let them marry girls with Jewish names." Second son comes home, "Daddy, I met the girl of my dreams. What's her name?" "Smith." That's not a Jewish name. "Sorry, I love her. She's okay. I heard that from your brother. Go in peace. You have my blessing. Please, God, I have 1 son left. Let him marry a girl with a Jewish name." Third son comes home, "Daddy, I met the girl of my dreams. What's her name?" "Goldberg." "Goldberg, praise God, a Jewish name. What's her first name?" "Whoopi." You have today in the United States about 6 million Jews. 71% intermarriage means about 4 million Christians. In other words, when the Muslims in America start massacring Jews, they're going to start massacring Christians. So I'm expecting 10 million immigrants to Israel. And by the law of return, these people who are married to Jews or related to Jews, if you have 1 Jewish grandparent, if you can prove it, you can move to Israel. Okay. You understand why this party is so critical for Israel's future? Hosea 11, verse 10. I'm paraphrasing now. "My children Ephraim will come home trembling from the west as the Lord roars like a lion." What's the west? United States, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, wherever there's a Jewish community. You know, praise God, I spent 10 wonderful days in Canada, and I came back last night, across the border. And I have my second most important testimony. The first most important testimony is Dallas Council on World Affairs, which defines the harlot. The harlot riding the dragon, servicing the dragon, Islam. And I was in Edmonton. This happened in the summer of 1999. It's in my books. And I'm driving from California on I-5. You all heard of I-5. And I went up through Oregon and Washington State. And, you know, I always say I suffer for Christ in Florida in the winter. And I suffer for Christ in Vancouver and Seattle in the summer, which is what I'm doing now. So I crossed the border into Canada in the summer of '99. And I go up to a little area called Maple Ridge, which is about an hour to the east of Vancouver, a little farmhouse, 50 people there. And I do a 10-hour teaching, 3 nights, 3.5 hours a night. And so you're very lucky it's only an hour and a half tonight. And then I drive 2 days. Wednesday, Thursday, I drive up to Edmonton in the province of Alberta, halfway up to Alaska. And I preach in a Northern Baptist church. Then Friday, it was the eve of the Sabbath, and my Christian hostess, Cora Brisbois, calls up the local Orthodox rabbi and says, "We have this Israeli army spokesman, Avi Lipkin. Can you take him for the Sabbath?" And he says, "Sure, send them over." So I go over to the rabbi. The first thing he says to me, "What's a nice Jewish boy like you doing in the Christian churches?" And I said to him, "Listen, Rabbi, we're 5 million war heroes in Israel, but the Muslims are 1.5 billion. If we had 100 million born-agains on our side, that may change the playing field here in our favor." And he said, son, you know, that's a very good idea. I never thought of that. And it's very good that you go to the churches. I would never stop in a church, but if you go to the churches, that's good. God bless you. The next morning after the service, the rabbi calls me up and says, the Christians give Avi 10 hours to speak. We're going to give him 10 minutes to speak. And as soon as I got up to speak, I got shouted down by two liberals, you know, liberals with a capital L. And they wouldn't let me speak. They said, you know, we're not going to let you speak against the Muslims. And I couldn't speak. Every time I tried to get up to speak, they shouted me down. See, liberals are liberal with you if you're liberal like they are. But if you are not liberal like they are, they're not going to be very liberal with you because liberals are communist totalitarians. So, you know the true liberals are Bible-believing Christians and Orthodox Jews. People who believe in the Bible, they don't have this inferiority complex. They're ready to listen because they know God's in control. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. So who comes to my rescue? We have only 10 minutes. A Christian Messianic woman who is going to the Jewish Orthodox synagogue every Shabbat. You know why? Because Jesus went to synagogue on Shabbat. He didn't go to church on Sunday. And, you know, if you go to a Jewish synagogue, you know, on Shabbat, we read from the law, we read from the prophets, and then we have a sermon. That's what Jesus did. You know, nothing has changed in 2,000 years. You know the joke about how 100 rabbis change a light bulb? 100 Reform rabbis asked, does the light bulb want to change? 100 conservative rabbis asked, you know, say, we want to establish a committee. And how do 100 Orthodox rabbis change a light bulb? Change? So nothing has changed in 2,000 years. So anyway, so she gets up and she says, listen, if you're not going to let Avi speak, I have a testimony for you. I am a social worker for the government of Canada, province of Alberta, city of Edmonton. And I am a caseworker for an Egyptian Muslim woman doctor from Cairo. Now, you all remember Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was a saint. 99 years of her life in the Catholic Church were devoted to these poor people of India, and she was feeding the poor, healing the sick. And when she died in her home, which is the Catholic Church. Her bed was the Catholic Church. Her family was the Catholic Church. She had all the backing of the church. This Muslim woman in Cairo was in her 40s, unmarried, and she was doing everything completely as a volunteer in one of the poorest neighborhoods of Cairo. So she was in her 40s, unmarried, and she said, you know what? Midlife crisis. And she applied for a visa to emigrate to Canada. And the Canadians snapped her up immediately, said, sure. You know, this is a very famous woman in Egypt. And they gave her a visa. The next day, there's a knock on her door. It was 3 jihadis. Now, you all know what jihadis are. They're the tall guys with the turbans and the flowing robes and the Quran and the beard. And she knew them from the mosque. They knew her. And they said to her in Arabic, Mabruk, which means congratulations. And she answered them, Allah barak fik, Allah should also give you congratulations. Why do I have congratulations? They said, because we know you're going to Canada. Well, how did you know? That was just approved yesterday. Oh, we know everything about you. And we have our fanatic Muslims everywhere in the Egyptian government. This is 1999. And secondly, yes, we have congratulations in store for us because you're going to work for us. She says, what does that mean? Oh, yeah, you're going to be our spy in Canada. Well, what does that mean? Well, you're going to have a clinic. And when people come to your clinic, Jew, Christian, Muslim, they're going to sign up with their name, address, telephone number, their place of employment, address, telephone number. And you're going to put this all on a hard disk and you're going to give it to us. And when we get orders for jihad or holy war, we will know where the Jews are to kill them. And if the Jews are married to Christians, we're going to kill the Christian spouses. And if the Jews and the Christians have children, we're going to kill them too. And we're going to kill the Messianics. We're going to kill the pastors that love Israel and their churches. And by the way, there are not too many churches that love Israel, in case you didn't know. So the Muslims are very, very active on the computer to map out who are the Jews, who are the Christians who smell of the Jews, who are with the Jews, the Messianics and the pastors that love Israel, Zionist pastors. And they're all targeted for destruction. So anyway, so this doctor said to them, listen guys, you know, I'm a devout Muslim. I go to the mosque every day to pray. I give zakat. Zakat is charity. And I don't think there's a woman more devout than I am, but I'm also a doctor. I swore the Hippocratic Oath to heal people and save lives. I'm not into politics. I don't understand politics, and I'm not into killing people, even the Jews. So the jihadi said to her, "Oh, okay, so you don't want to work with us?" She says, "No, I don't want to work with you." So standing next to this doctor, woman doctor, was another woman, her best friend from childhood, helping her in the clinic. And the jihadis grabbed this woman friend of the doctor, pulled out a knife, and they slit her throat. Well, what are you going, oh, you know what ISIS is doing. That's the way they operate. They slit people's throats. They behead people. And they pointed their finger at the doctor, and they said, if you don't work for us in Canada, this is what's going to happen to you. So the next day, she had political asylum in the Canadian embassy, and the Royal Canadian Air Force flew in a private jet to pick her up in Cairo and bring her to Edmonton. And this Christian Messianic woman in the Orthodox Jewish synagogue is the caseworker. You tell me that God did not have a divine appointment for me in Edmonton that night. And then she went on to say, I work with the RCMP. And the RCMP says very clearly that 90% of the Muslims are peacekeeping, law-abiding citizens. Only, in quotes, only 10% are terrorists following the agenda of the Middle East. I'm going to show you in a few minutes that 30 million Muslims live in America today. It's one of the biggest secrets that the American people are being denied knowledge of. And nobody in Washington is accountable. The floodgates are open, and the flood is coming in. Okay. You got 6 million Jews, 4 million Christians married to Jews, children, 10 million. How many of the 10 million can be killed in one day by 3 million, 10% of the 30 million when they get the orders for jihad? And I want you to know something. I thank you and I praise God for all of you, because the Jews will not listen to me. Jews don't want to hear this, because Jews don't want to leave America. But God's word is that he's going to bring the Jews home. And I have news for you. You all's here, as they say in Texas, you're all Jews. And by the way, I have to issue a warning. Every time you guys applaud or disrupt me, it's going to be another 5 minutes on the message. So what I want to do now is I want to start talking about Russia-Ukraine. And I want you to know that I have done an hour and 40 minutes of teaching on YouTube when you go home. I'm going to do it about 15 minutes tonight, because Russia-Ukraine is part of the overall picture of what I'm talking about tonight. And many Ukrainians and many Russians have seen my teaching, and both sides applaud my teaching because I don't take a side. I just explain the history. And both sides are right. Ukraine is right, Russia is right. Okay. But you have to understand the reality of what's going on with Russia-Ukraine to understand the bigger picture. So when you go home, you have an hour and 40 minutes. The downloads are all free. And be blessed and get the information. And I want you to know, I kind of fell into this Islamic threat scenario because of my wife, Rachel, because she's from Egypt, and she's an intelligence gatherer, and she gives me all this information all the time. And I was an army spokesman. I was in Prime Minister Shamir's office. But my BA in college was Sovietology, Russian studies, East European studies. And I want to give you a few minutes of history because, you know, most Americans are not even learning anymore about 1620 and Plymouth Rock. Most Americans are not learning anymore about George Washington and the American Revolution or Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War. Most Americans now draw a complete blank. And young Americans today, the whole day, they're on their little phones, you know. But nobody's reading and nobody's following the history that we had to do in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I'm not talking about history from 1620. I'm talking about history from 995 AD. The Russian Orthodox Church was established by Cyril and Methodius, Saint Cyril and Saint Methodius in 995 AD. Because the Muslims, the Turks and others were coming up from Turkey and raping and burning and vandalizing, as we see in Iraq today. Carrying off women into harems, slavery. Moscow, Warsaw, Poland, Kiev. It was a horrible time. It was a time of great destruction, great suffering. And the church came to Russia to mobilize the Slavic tribes to defend themselves from Turkey, from Islam. How many people remember the year 1053 AD? That was the split between the Catholics in Rome and the Eastern Roman Empire in Byzantium. You know, you guys talk about Protestants and Catholics, and I have about 2 hours of jokes about Protestants and Catholics. Ukraine is Catholic. Russia is Orthodox. So number one, you've got a religious war that has not stopped for 1,000 years. Okay. And I'm going to share a few crazy things tonight. You see my blue eyes? You know, my brother had cancer. He still has cancer. And so he did a DNA test. And they asked my brother, where did you get Norwegian genes from? I got Norwegian genes. Those blue eyes are not Palestinian. And I pieced together pieces of the history of my mother's family from Poland. And I really believe that the King of Poland gave his daughter to my forebear, who was brought over from Germany. We were knighted by the King of Poland, and we built the walls of Warsaw. So we were given the name Kamien. Kamien in Polish and Russian and Ukrainian means stone. My family were stonemasons, and we built the walls of Warsaw. Why did the King of Poland build the walls of Warsaw? Because the Turks were coming in from the south and threatening Poland. The Turks were at the gates of Europe. The Turks were at the gates of Vienna. How many people remember 1683? The King of Poland comes down with some German barons and their armies, and they defeat the Turks, and this begins the pushback of the Turks across the Dardanelles. How many people remember the Battle of Lepanto, 1571? I mean, these are important things you need to know. Okay, I have another joke, I have another piece of history you all know. How many people remember the Battle of the Spanish Armada? I don't see enough hands. That's 1588. The British and the Dutch were Protestants, defeat the Catholic Spanish fleet. That's why you know about it, because the Protestants won. But 17 years before, 1571, the Catholic Spanish fleet defeats the Turkish Muslim fleet at Lepanto. This was the beginning of the end of the Ottoman Empire. So I'm talking about all these battles that are taking place in Europe that Americans never learned. You don't learn American history. Why should you learn European history? It's tragic. History is history. You don't take sides. You say, this is what this side did, this is what that side did. You know, we report, you decide. Okay. Now, the King of Poland actually created an empire. Poland, in the 1600s, extended from the Baltic Sea in the north all the way down to the Black Sea. Ukraine was under the rule of the King of Poland, and they chafed. Ukrainians didn't like the Poles. Poles are also Catholics. They're also Slavic people, but they're a different group. And the Poles dominated Russia. And the Russians didn't like the Poles either. 1648, leader of the Ukrainians, the George Washington of the Ukrainians, his name is Khmelnytsky. And Khmelnytsky leads a revolt, massacres the Catholic priests of Poland, the Polish nobility, and the Jews, because the Jews were the tax collectors and the administrators of the Polish Empire. According to the information I have, maybe I'm wrong, 500,000 Jews were killed in 1648 by the Ukrainians. 500,000 Jews. Khmelnytsky, the George Washington of the Ukrainians, was a mass murderer equal to the barbarity of Hitler in the Jewish eyes. Because 500,000 Jews was 1/3 of the Jewish people at the time. How many people remember Fiddler on the Roof? Remember when Tevye points his finger up at God and says, why do you choose us all the time? Can't you choose somebody else? Why are we the chosen people? Because being the chosen people means everybody hates you and everything. By the way, Christians also. Why are Christians hated? Because Christians are chosen people too. Okay. And anyone who hates the Jews is going to hate the Christians, and anyone who hates the Christians is going to hate the Jews. How many people know that Homeland Security today says that if you're a Christian, you're a terrorist? Am I making this up? How many people know that Homeland Security describes Bible believers, Jews or Christians, as mentally unstable? I'm going to get to that a little later, about 3 hours from now. So in the 1800s, of course, after Napoleon brings down the gates of the ghettos and lets the Jews out and says Jews should be able to be in any job they want and be part of the society. But the anti-Semitism never stopped. And the pogroms were terrible, the massacres of the Jews. And so a whole bunch of Jews said, you know what? Something's wrong here. All of this hatred comes from God. Now, you know, in the book of Ephesians, it talks about the one new man in Christ. How many people know the book of Ephesians, one new man in Christ? Okay, so these Jews said, all we need to do is get rid of God. If we get rid of God, there'll be no more hatred. Because all the hatred comes from God. How many people have heard people in your families that are not saved who say that all the hatred and killing comes from religion? And your government says it too. Get rid of religion, there'll be no more hatred, there'll be no more killing. So the Marxist, socialist, communist movements were created in order to abolish God and thereby stop the hatred. That's what these Jews really believed. Get rid of God, there'll be no more anti-Semitism. And so you know that after World War I or during World War I, there was a breakup of the Tsarist Russia, and you had this, the Reds fighting the Whites. Reds were the communists. And you did not really find too many Jews in the white armies. You found the Jews in the red armies, communist armies. And actually, my grandfather in Poland, my grandfather of blessed memory, fought in Pilsudski's army in Poland against Trotsky and the communists. Then he went to Argentina, of course. That's why I preach in Spanish, because I speak Spanish as my mother tongue. We don't want to get into that now. The Ukrainians led a very tough revolt against Russia, and they were defeated by the communists. Now, Stalin comes to power, gets rid of the Jews, but in the late 1917, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, until Trotsky was killed, there were a lot of Jewish communists, and they defeated the Ukrainians. And then Stalin comes in with something called collectivization. The Ukrainians had small farms. The Ukrainians were very successful farmers. Ukraine was the breadbasket of Europe until the collectivization. And so when the communists came in, many Jews were leaders in these communist armies, and the Jews had never forgotten what Khmelnytsky did to us in 1648. 20, 30, 40 million Ukrainians and Russians died from the Great Famine. How many people have heard of the Great Famine in Russia? Stalin's favorite motto was, you will starve, but you will export. People starved. Tens of millions of people. Stalin was considered just as bad as Hitler in the eyes of the Ukrainians and many Russians. World War II, Hitler comes into the Ukraine, and the Ukrainians welcome Hitler as a liberator. For them, he was a liberator. Many Ukrainians joined the German army. There was also another group that joined the German army, the Tatars. How many people heard of the Tatars? Tatars are Turks. Crimea, you've heard of Crimea. Crimea was Tatar. So when Stalin comes back with the victory of the Red Army, the Ukrainians are punished. The Tatars are expelled to a new land. They have like an Indian reservation called Tatarstan. You know, here in America, they make casinos, and now these Native Americans are making a lot of money. In Russia, they found oil. The Muslim Tatars found oil. And they became very rich. But a lot of Tatars said, we're going back to Crimea as soon as we can, because that was the Jerusalem of the Tatars, Crimea. And today, there are two groups in the Ukraine who hate the Russians, the Ukrainians and the Tatars. We're talking about hundreds of years of war and hatred between Russians and other groups. How many people remember the the Olympic Games in Sochi just a few months ago. How many people heard of the Circassians? Circassians? I see one hand, two hands, three hands. If you've been to Israel, you may know who your Circassians are. Circassians are Turks. Now, Sochi was a Circassian town. It wasn't Russian. In 1854, the Tsarist army conquered this Circassian land and massacred 3 million Circassians. There is a hill in Sochi called Red Hill, not because of the Red Communist Party, but because of the blood that was spilled of the Circassians. It was a Holocaust. The Russian army killed 3 million Circassians. Many others fled back to Turkey, and the Turks resettled them in Israel. And the Circassian Turks are Muslims. They serve in the Israeli army. See, Israel is such an apartheid country. We have Muslim Bedouin, we have Muslim Circassians, we have other Muslims. We have Christians in our army. We have Druze in our army. Muslims serve in all facets of Israeli life. And yet there are, I don't want to say a bad word in this house of God, there are people who actually come and say Israel's an apartheid country. You know who's apartheid? The Arabs. Because Jews cannot live in any Muslim land. They'll be beheaded. Christians cannot live in any Muslim land. They're going to be beheaded. Blacks cannot live in Islamic lands. They're going to be beheaded and raped and kidnapped and enslaved. But that's okay because the Muslims, they can do it. You know why? Because they have the money, they have the oil. And nobody's going to protest because you're going to be doing business with these people. You do business with these people, you're selling your soul to the devil. You're going to enjoy it at first. And then comes payday. When you serve Islam, later comes payday. Okay. So we've spoken about Dallas, we've spoken about Edmonton, we've spoken about Russia. One last point I wanted to make. 1953, Stalin dies. Does anyone know on what Jewish holiday Stalin died? Purim. Stalin had a plan in his last days of senility to kill every last Jew in the Soviet Union. And he died like Haman the Evil. In 1994, a year later, who takes over Russia? Nikita Khrushchev. How many people know Nikita Khrushchev is Ukrainian? Nikita Khrushchev is Ukrainian. He wasn't a Russian. And because he was now the leader of Russia, Soviet Union, he decided to try to placate the Ukrainians for all the trouble and all the suffering the Ukrainians went through under communism. And if you know the maps, if you go home and look up 1953, Ukraine, the map, it's half the size of what it is today. And so Khrushchev said, we're going to double the size of the Ukraine. We're going to give you Russian land. We're going to give you Russian industries. We're going to give you Russian population. You've heard of Donetsk. You've heard of Dnepropetrovsk. You've heard of Lugansk. This was not Ukraine, it's Russia. But it was given by Khrushchev, the Ukrainian, over to the Ukrainians. I don't know how many of you know the history of Yugoslavia. Are there any people here from Yugoslavia? One hand, two hands. Any? There was an area of what is today Croatia, and it was called Krajina. Krajina was settled by Serbs, and this was part of Greater Serbia. Tito was a Croat, and Tito, to placate the Croats, gave Serbian land to the Croats. Now, as long as this remains part of one big Yugoslav federation, doesn't matter. But when the federation broke up into Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia, so the Serbs said, give us back our land. That area was settled by Serbs for centuries. And Bill Clinton bombed the heck out of the Serbs to force them to leave this land in the hands of the Croats, and the Serbs were ethnically cleansed from that area. And the Serbs were ethnically cleansed from the Muslim areas in Bosnia and in Kosovo. By the way, there's another country, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Macedonia. Macedonia is 40% Albanian. Very soon it'll be a Muslim republic too. And the mosques are going up, built at the courtesy of the Saudis. The whole Balkans is going to be retaken by Turkey. So you see, we're getting now to Turkey. There's a reason I'm sharing all of this. All of this fits a picture. What Putin is saying today is that he wants the Russian land back. Is he right? Is he wrong? Only force will show us. It's going to be by force. Putin is now riding a great wave of popularity among the people of Russia. And I personally have nothing against Putin, but I think Putin will be probably assassinated by one of the oligarchs. Who are the oligarchs in Russia? They're the people who have the billions of dollars. They're the ones who do the business with the West. These people are now hurting by the sanctions. And they're saying, why is Putin doing this? We want to be part of the European Union. Ukraine wants to be part of the European Union. We want to have a better standard of living and more business. And so I draw my first conclusion from this evening regarding the one world government. The one world government is universalist in its ideology. Russia is nationalist. China is nationalist. It used to be communist China. It ain't communist anymore. It's now capitalist China. North Korea, nationalist. Iran, nationalist. And I have news for you, Israel is nationalist. The one world government cannot tolerate nationalist governments. And Russia, I believe, will be brought under control by the one world government one way or another. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Turks. I started talking about the Tatars. They were in Crimea. About the Circassians. They were in Sochi. And there's another group, Chechens. How many people remember the Chechens? Russia has been killing these people for centuries. And the Chechens have been killing the Russians for centuries. Who's right? They're both right. But the Turks are Muslims, Sunni Muslims, and they will never forget the Russians. And they side with the Ukrainians, because the enemy of my enemy is my ally. Are you with me? Okay, now I'm going to start going to some very crazy stuff. Russia today is 150 million people population. The Soviet Union, from the bad old days of the Cold War, Soviet Union was 350 million people. And today Russia's 150 million people. What happened to the 200 million people? They're in the 6 stands. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Azerbaijan. 200 million Turkish Muslims. You see, the Soviet Union was a Muslim country before the breakup in 1989. So Russia today is only 150 million Russians. There is a Christian renaissance today in Russia. Of course, they don't like Pentecostals or Baptists or anyone who's not from the Russian Orthodox Church. But within the mentality of Russian people, the Russian Orthodox Church is having a revival. I was on Radio Moscow in June of 1994. I visited Moscow. And I was interviewed in Russian. It took me 4 hours, to prepare the questions and answers in Russian. I read the answers. I said exactly what I meant to say. The Russians were very nice about the interview. And I said to the Russians in 1994, communism is over. America is not your enemy anymore. Europe is not your enemy anymore. And the Jews in Israel not your enemy anymore. The enemy of Russia has always been Islam. You know Putin? You know what he says? How many people heard Putin say that what made Russia great is its Christianity? One hand. Any other hands? 2 hands, 3 hands, 4 hands. Wait a minute. The United States says if you're a Christian, you're a terrorist. And Russia says Putin says what made Russia great is its Christianity. That scares me. America and Russia have reversed roles. And forgive me, those of you who hate Russia. I pray for Russia. I also pray for the Ukraine. I pray for all Christians in all Christian countries. So now you have 200 million Turkic Muslims in the 6 former Soviet republics, the stands. Let's look at the European Union. European Union is 350 million people. America, 300 million, 307. Now, forgive me for saying it like this. I'm not saying this to be offending to God. I said, let's put God aside for a moment, and let's think now like one world government economists. How many people here think that immigration is bad for America? Raise your hand. If you think immigration is bad for America. I see 1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands. Okay. Economics is about numbers. If you have 150 million people like Russia, you're going to have the economy of 150 million people. If you have the economy of the United States of 300 million people, you're going to have a bigger economy. Now, Europe is 350 million people. Very soon, Turkey is planning to join the European Union. How many people know Turkey wants to join the European Union? Who supports that? President Obama. Now listen to this. I'm going to follow me through all the way to the end. 300 million Europeans who are not Muslims and 50 million Muslims. So you think 300 versus 50, not a big deal. Turkey joins the European Union, 70 million Turks from Anatolia, not a big deal. 70 million and 50 million, 120 million. So you still have 300 million non-Muslims, not a big deal. What's the problem? If you've been to Turkey, and if you've gone to the government offices or schools in Turkey, government buildings, and you look on the wall and you see the map of Turkey, it extends all the way from Morocco to China, and from the Adriatic, meaning Albania, Bosnia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, the Six Stands, and all the way into Xinjiang province of China. All Turkey. It's all painted red with the Turkish flag. The Turks have aspirations to return to the great old days of the Ottoman Empire. Now, you know, if you're a Jew, or you make Aliyah, you have 1 Jewish grandparent, 3 non-Jewish grandparents, you're not a Jew. You move to Israel, you get an Israeli passport. I don't know if you know that. Immediately. So the Turks have the same deal with the Turkic Muslims of the former Soviet Union. 200 million Turkic former Soviet citizens may now move to Turkey and get Turkish passports. So you see, if Turkey joins the European Union, you're talking about 50 million Muslims in Europe, 70 million Anatolians, and 200 million Turkic Soviets. 320 million Muslims versus 300 million non-Muslims. Europe is now a Muslim continent. The moment Turkey joins the European Union, who supports it? Obama. Europe becomes a Muslim continent. Okay. I said forget about God. Let's forget about God. You have 620 million people. Can America remain only 300 million people? No. America has to reach 620 million people too. How many people heard of NAFTA? Now, I'm not saying I support NAFTA. I'm just trying to explain to you how the economists think. What's NAFTA? NAFTA is Canada, Mexico, US. That's half a billion people, 500 million. Did you ever wonder why are these Central American children coming into the US? Did you ever wonder why the US is not putting up a fence along the Mexican border? And the answer is you don't need a fence. Because Mexico, US, and Canada are going to join up as one country. It's going to be called the Amero. How many people know this theory? I'm not making it up. Now, why are the Central Americans coming in? Because the 6 republics of Central America, they're good people. They're Latinos. They're going to join Mexico. So you're going to go up from 500 million population to 520 million people, but the Europeans have 620 million. You're still short 100 million people. Where are you going to get 100 million people to equal in numbers the European Union? And that's 100 million Muslims from the Arab Spring. Okay, are you with me? How do you get 100 million Muslims into the US? Very simple, the Arab Spring. The US government supports the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood's plan is to annihilate the Christians. You annihilate the Christians, you destroy the economy. Again, we're not talking about God now. We're talking about economics. The Christians in Egypt are 10 million. The Muslims are 80 million. Get rid of the 10 million Coptic Christians, God forbid. You've destroyed the Egyptian economy. And then 80 million Egyptian Muslims starve to death. What happens when 80 million people starve? They leave. Where do they go? America. Okay, now, you'll forgive me. I'm going to quote from the Bible. I'm going to show you how mentally unstable I am. Now, had I been here 4 years ago, remember the Arab Spring started in February 2011. If I had come here 4 years ago and I had quoted Isaiah 19, 1 and 2. How many people know Isaiah 19, 1 and 2? I see a few hands. Isaiah 19, 1 and 2, don't forget, Mubarak was still firmly in power in Egypt. He wasn't a Democrat. I mean, he was a dictator. He was a tyrant. He ruled Egypt for 30 years. But you had stability in Egypt. Isaiah 19, 1 and 2 says, Egyptian will fight Egyptian. Brother will fight brother. Neighbor will fight neighbor. And city will fight city. Does anyone remember these verses? So let me tell you a story. February 11th, 2011, this Tunisian fruit vendor is pushing this cart. And a policeman says, come over here. Where's my bribe? In other words, where's your license to push your cart? And this poor Tunisian guy said, I never had a license. You know me. Well, I want my bribe. He said, I'm not going to pay you a bribe. So he arrests him. And at the police station there in Tunisia, this little village, they confiscate his cart. They confiscate his fruit. They confiscate his scales, where he weighed the fruit. His only property. And then a Muslim policewoman slaps him in the face, the greatest insult to a Muslim man. Eventually, they got to let him go. As soon as he leaves the police station, buys a liter, quart of gasoline, the gas station pours it all over himself, self-immolates, he dies, and all the Tunisians are holding up their cell phones, videotaping this. Within minutes, all of Tunisia's up in flames. This was the beginning of the Arab Spring. Within minutes, all of Tunisia was, because they're under the French influence. Everybody has Facebook and everyone has Twitter, the social media. The Tunisians had had enough of this crummy, rotten, corrupt government in Tunisia, Ben Ali. The next day, Libya. How many people remember Gaddafi? 26 years, America wanted to get rid of Gaddafi. And America couldn't do it. The people got rid of him. The next day, Egypt. The next day, Yemen. The next day, Syria. The whole Middle East goes up in flames. This is called the Arab Spring. We are now living in a time of a Holocaust. There's a Holocaust of 15 million Christians in the Middle East today. Where are the churches? Forgive me for saying it, they ain't going to be raptured. The 15 million Christians are not being raptured. They're being beheaded. The daughters are being raped, kidnapped, forced to marry Muslim men. They're slaughtering the Christians. They're beheading. They're crucifying. They're killing. They're taking a sword, taking a little boy and cutting him through the middle to show how wonderful Allah is, how merciful, how compassionate Allah is. So am I mentally unstable when I quote Isaiah 19, 1 and 2? God's word. It didn't happen 4 years ago. It happened 3.5 years ago. And there's another chapter, Ezekiel 28, 29. It says, Egypt will become a desolation. It says, no human and no animal will tread in Egypt for 40 years. 40 years. It doesn't say the Egyptians are going to die. It says they're going to be scattered to the four corners of the earth. Has that ever happened in history? It's never happened that Egypt empties out completely. In my opinion, it could be an earthquake, because Egypt is earthquake prone. It says in the Bible that this desolation will be from Aswan. What's in Aswan? The dam, all the way to Migdol on the Mediterranean. Now, if that dam goes, the Egyptians have about half an hour or an hour to run east or west away from the Nile River Valley up into the higher desert. You're going to have 80, 90 million starving and thirsting people in the desert. Can you send an airlift every day to feed 90 million people? How many people here heard of Agenda 21? Okay, now forgive me. I don't mean to pick on people, but Everyone says that these FEMA camps are for beheading Christians who oppose the government. And I think the FEMA camps are there to house these Egyptians when the United Nations says there's an international emergency. We have to airlift all these people out of the desert of Egypt. And America is the greatest country in the world. America is the richest country of the world. And the Saudis have promised to pay for 50 million homes. How many people think the US dollar is going to collapse? How many people think the US economy is going to collapse? Now, among all my sins, and my sins, God knows, very plentiful, one of my sins is I speak a lot to the tea parties. And I always start with that question. And I say to them, I do think eventually there could be an economic problem for America. I mean, you sell your soul to the devil, which is Islam, Allah. I have a 3-year jail sentence for saying it. I say it all the time. You sell your soul to the devil, the day's going to come that it's payday. Remember what I said before. My wife picked up a broadcast. Even if it takes 150 years, we're going to make America Muslim. How do you make America Muslim? You build houses for Muslims. You bring in 50 million, 100 million. You suppress Christianity. You suppress Judaism. I've been in churches where good Christian people, good folk, would come up to me and say, you know, if we keep our jobs and gas goes down to $2.50 a gallon, we vote Obama. Doesn't matter Obama or George W. Bush or Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter. I mean, I think America has had some very crazy presidents. How can a country so great like America have such presidents? Democrat or Republican? You know, I just came back from Canada. I loved my time in Canada. It was really, I was preaching every night. It was like vacation for me. I mean, I feel like I was in Switzerland or something, another country. I spend most of my time in Texas, Oklahoma. And, you know, when you drive northeast from Dallas and you go about across the Red River, you go like 20, 25 minutes into Oklahoma. Beautiful, beautiful land. Rolling hills, forests, lakes. You don't see one person. One person you don't see. Empty. You could easily fit 10 million Muslims in that area. How many people heard of the Kiamishi Mountains in Oklahoma? That's to the east of 75. How many people heard of the Ozarks? You have room easily in this area for 20, 30 million Muslims. Texas is empty. Oklahoma is empty. Missouri is empty. Arkansas is empty. Louisiana is empty. There's room for everybody. And if you have 100 million more people in this country, your economy grows, and the Saudis are going to pay. Do you understand why the economy is going to grow? Your dollar is not going to collapse. Your economy is not going to collapse because you are owned by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a direct interest in keeping you afloat. And who else? China. China doesn't want you to go broke. I've heard of this BRIC, you know, the BRIC theory of Brazil, Russia, India, China. I don't accept it. Russia may want to bring America down, but Russia's 150 million people. America's going to be 620 million people with Mexico, Canada, Central America, and the Muslims. Okay. I want to go now. What I'm doing is I'm going to many, many different subjects and then sewing it all together like a quilt. I was born in New York in 1949. America was a Judeo-Christian country. 250 million Christians, 6 million Jews. Terrific Judeo-Christian country. I moved to Israel in 68. In 68, you had 100,000 Muslims in America. So still the Jews, 6 million. We were number 2. Judeo-Christian country. President Obama was very correct in his inaugural address when he said that today America is a Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu country. How many people read his inaugural address? Go to the internet. Inaugural address, January 2009. Obama says America is a Christian, Muslim country. Isn't that wonderful? One nation under God and Satan. Okay. How did you get one nation under God and Satan? How did you get 30 million Muslims? So I'm going to take about 10, 15 minutes to explain this to you. Firstly, America had one of its most genius presidents in 1979. His name was Jimmy Carter. I can't understand how such a great country could have a president like this. And, I mean, I lived in Israel since 1968. I went to Iran as a businessman in 1969, and I was in a hotel there. Half the people in the hotel were Israeli officers, and half the people in the hotel were Iranian officers, hosting the Israeli officers. Iran was a great friend of Israel. Iran was a great friend of America. Iran was the cornerstone of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. The Shah of Iran was a dictator. You cannot rule in Islamic countries unless you're a dictator. There is no democracy in Islam. You know what my wife picked up in Arabic? The Saudis were saying, Americans are saying we're going to bring democracy to the Middle East. The Saudis were saying, over our dead bodies. Because democracy is a Judeo-Christian thing. We don't believe in democracy. We believe in Sharia law. We believe in Islam. And so Jimmy Carter says, I don't like the Shah of Iran because he's a dictator, and dictators are guilty of human rights violations. And there's this man of God in Paris, France. His name is Ayatollah Khomeini. And Ayatollah Khomeini, Jimmy Carter says, is a Democrat, and he's going to bring all the people of Iran together, the women's groups and the socialist groups and the democratic groups and the labor unions, and overthrow this Shah, who's an evil dictator. And like Hitler, the first thing the Shah did when he came, the Ayatollah did when he came to power, he destroyed all the other groups. Jimmy Carter turned Iran from being America's #1 ally in the Islamic world to being America's #1 enemy. I can't understand how America can have such a stupid president. But of course, we all serve the same God. Wasn't it George W. Bush who said that Islam is a religion of love? Islam is a religion of peace. And we all serve the same God. And you've got churches in America, I don't want to mention names. You've got Chrislam churches. How many people heard of Chrislam? Those are synagogues of Satan. Because if you're praying to Allah, you're praying to Satan. I got to tell you a joke. I can't control it anymore. What's the difference between neurotic people and psychotic people? How many people heard this joke before? 1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands. Oh, my loyalists in the back, yes, from Port Orchard. I would mention your name, but I don't want the Muslims to come looking for you. And neurotic people dream about castles in the air. Psychotic people live in castles in the air. And psychiatrists collect the rent. Now, now I have to explain the joke. Now, Adolf Hitler was psychotic for many reasons. I'll give you only 2. He thought he could conquer the earth, and he thought he could kill all the Jews. Can you conquer the earth? Can anyone conquer the earth? Anyone who thinks he can conquer the earth is stark, raving, mad, lunatic, psychotic. The Persians tried it, the Greeks tried it, the Romans tried it, the Mongols tried it, Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin. Nobody can conquer the earth. Only the Lord has dominion over the earth. Amen? Okay. That's psychosis number 1. Psychosis number 2, Hitler thought he could kill all the Jews. Can you kill all the Jews? Now, there are 2 types of human beings. There are believers and there are non-believers. Now, if you're a believer, you're a Jew or a Christian who believes in God, believes in the Bible. Now, if you believe in the Bible, you believe in Jeremiah 31:35, which says, there will be no more Jews on the face of the earth when the moon, the sun, and the stars stop shining. You know what that means? You better pray for the Jews. Because when the Jews go, the world goes. Okay, now, 2/3 of the human race, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, good people. They're all good people. But they don't believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or the Bible. But the Hindus, the Buddhists, and the Muslims all know that the Jews have been scattered to the 4 corners of the earth. If you can't conquer the earth, psychosis number 1, you can't kill all the Jews, psychosis number 2. Make sense? Okay, what does Islam believe? Psychosis number 1, it's going to conquer the earth. Psychosis number 2, it's going to kill all the Jews. Now, unlike Hitler, psychosis number 3, they're going to kill 2 billion Christians. Psychosis number 4, they're going to kill 1 billion Hindus. Psychosis number 5, they're going to kill 2 billion Buddhists, including the communist Chinese. Now, I recommend to the Muslims not to mess around with the communist Chinese. The communist Chinese know what to do. They don't have the ACLU. Psychosis number 6 is that 1/6 of the human race can kill 5/6 of the human race and get away with it. Psychosis number 7, after the 1/6 kills the 5/6, the 1/6, what does it do to each other? They kill each other. Sunnis kill Sunnis, which is what we see with ISIS. Shiites kill Shiites, and Sunnis and Shiites kill each other. Islam is the perfect depopulating system on the planet Earth. Why is Allah Satan? Because he wants to kill all of us, including the Muslims, because we're all in the image of God. For Satan to say he's greater than God, all those in the image of God have to be destroyed. This is perfectly understood if you know the theology here. And of course, psychosis number 8, when you die for Allah, you get 72 virgins. I can't manage with Rachel. I don't know how they marry 4. 72 virgins would be hell. So this leads to one more joke, and I'll get back to serious business. Osama bin Laden dies for Allah. Beam me up, Scotty. He's up in heaven waiting for 72 virgins. Who shows up? George Washington. George Washington beats him up. Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, beats him up. President Adams beats him up. And the whole line forms of 72 tall, strapping, 6-footers to beat him up. He goes, wait a second, we've got all eternity for this. I'm going to Allah's office to protest. Goes to Allah's office. You promised me 72 virgins. No, silly, you weren't listening. I said 72 Virginians. I got a 3-year jail sentence in Switzerland because I told this joke every night in Switzerland. And I said, Allah is Satan. And Islam is not a religion. Islam is a criminal psychosis. And I'm saying it now. And I want to say one more thing. I love the Muslims. Listen carefully. I love the Muslims. When the Allies defeated Nazi Germany in 1945, did the Americans wipe out Germany? Americans did what Jesus said. Bless the enemy. Marshall Plan, rebuild Europe, rebuild Germany. Today, Germany is your best friend. The Germans could only have a life when they had democracy rammed down their throats by the Americans, the British, and French. I want the same for the Muslims. And I don't care what the Saudis say over our dead bodies. They're going to have democracy because we cannot tolerate Islam on the face of the earth. And I have a half hour left. I'm going to get to very soon to the bottom line, how this is going to happen. Because Islam is so crazy, so psychotic, that in the end, even the harlot is going to dismount the dragon and kill the dragon. The harlot, one world government. So let's talk a little bit about how the Muslims come into this country. When Jimmy Carter brings down the Shah, you have to remember, 9 million Iranians had to flee Iran or be beheaded. Does anyone remember this from the late 70s, early 80s? 9 million Iranian Shiites, good people. They were your allies. They were Israel's allies. They had to get out of Iran and flee to the United States or be beheaded by Khomeini. Did America do the right thing to give them asylum? The answer is yes. Because they were your allies. The American president was so stupid that he turned Iran into enemy number 1. In gratitude, the first thing Khomeini did was to take the American embassy captive for 444 days. So now, if you have 9 million Shiite Iranians in the United States, 9 million and 6 million Jews, who's number 2 now in America? The Iranians. Okay. So we got 9 million Iranians. The Arab Sunni Immigrant Association claims at least 7 million members. This is a few years ago. It's a lot more now. How much is 7 million and 9 million? 16 million. How many people heard of Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam? 4 million. That's 20 million. We haven't even begun to discuss the Muslims from Bosnia, Albania, Turkey, Somalia, Indonesia, India, Africa, Chechens from Russia. How many people remember the Tsarnaev brothers in Boston? The bombing of the marathon bombing. The Russian government warned the U.S., these guys are terrorists. But Homeland Security is so riddled with Muslims now, it's like putting foxes in the hen house to guard. Okay. Let me tell you a few testimonies. As I said, I spend a lot of time in Texas. Sometimes I drive in, sometimes I fly in. Once I flew into Dallas, Fort Worth, rented a car, finished my 2 weeks there, returned the car to Dallas, Fort Worth Airport, and I returned the car to the rent-a-car company, and the young man who receives the car is an Indonesian Muslim, handsome, very nice man. And I'm in a rush to catch my plane, and very friendly guy. He yells out at me, "America's the greatest country on earth." So I stopped, and he turned around, and I said, "Yes, I know. Why do you think America's the greatest country on earth?" He said, "Well, I used to be like a UPS, FedEx delivery boy in Indonesia. And once I was delivering packages to the American embassy, and an American embassy official pointed his finger at me and said, 'Hey, you, do you want to go to America? There's a plane leaving tomorrow. Bring your parents, bring your siblings, bring your cousins and your friends. Let's fill up the plane. It's paid for.' I don't have a passport." "No passport needed, no visa needed. We will process you in the United States." Isn't America the greatest country on earth? That's how he came to the U.S. I've got 3 girlfriends. They're 75 years old. They work for trucking companies there in Joplin, in Missouri. And if you've ever been on mile marker number 4, when you're going in from Oklahoma, you got these 4 big truck stops, gas stations, and they're there every day with their truckers. And every day, 2 buses arrive from Mexico carrying Muslims. They drive in across Texas, Oklahoma. They stop at mile marker number 4. They have a break, and then they continue to the northern states. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Maine. Who's accountable for this? Who's responsible for this? Who made the decision to bring in these Muslims? Is there anyone who got the email that I got a few months ago of a charter pilot who quit the charter company working on contract for the U.S. government? They're illegally flying Muslims into the country every day. I'm not making this up. The plane doesn't go to the terminal. The plane goes to the end of the runway. There are buses there. And each Muslim disembarks from the plane. They give them $3,000, put them on buses, and send them to the north. I want to know who's responsible for this. This has been going on for decades. Let me tell you another way they bring Muslims into the country. Duke University, this is in my book, Christian Revival for Israel's Survival, 1999. It's about Duke University in High Point, North Carolina, not High Point, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They get, in those days it was a telex, or a cablegram or a phone call from some sultan in Brunei or something. He says, "I'm coming to present you with a gift. No strings attached, $23 million. Now, is Duke University going to say, "No, we don't want the money"? So this guy shows up. They make a big party for him. And in his dedication speech, he says, "Here's $23 million. We Muslims have a great respect for Duke University. And we're going to give you another check for $23 million if you establish an Arabic language chair and an Islamic studies chair." What is the university going to say? Now it's $46 million. And we know that you Americans don't know anything about Islam. We're going to help you. We're going to give you professors. What are Muslim professors? Missionaries. And we know you Americans are challenged by different alphabets and different languages, and we're going to help you. We're going to send you tutors, 500 young male students every year. And they're going to pay full room, board, and tuition. Do you know what full room, board, and tuition is in a college? That's a lot of money. Let's say by the end of the day, we're talking about a $100 million budget. After 4 years, you're talking about 2,000 young male Muslim students. 500 freshmen, 500 sophomores, 500 juniors, 500 seniors. Not girls, boys. Because you see, Muslim boys can marry Christian or Jewish or atheist girls. Muslim girls are not allowed to marry non-Muslim men because they'll be killed. Or unless it's under orders. I won't mention names. Sometimes Muslim women do marry high-level Americans. Okay, won't say anymore. They have funny names. Anyway, I want to ask you a question. When a Muslim man marries a Christian or Jewish woman, what's the religion of the children? Muslim. In other words, the plan is to overwhelm America with young male Muslim students and turn American non-Muslim women into Muslim baby factories. Now, when they marry American women, after 2 years, what happens? Passports. After they get passports, they can bring in their parents and brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles and aunts and friends. All you have to do is post bond that they won't be a burden on the U.S. economy. So the growth now is not arithmetic, the growth is now geometric. So I ask you a question. Do they have $100 million for Duke University? Do they have $1 billion for 10 universities? Do they have $100 billion for 1,000 universities? 1,000 universities times 500 student visas a year. This is not immigrants, this is student visas. Talk about 500,000 Muslims a year coming into the U.S. Give them a few decades, they're going to be 50 million, 100 million. Want another story? These are all stories. I collect them as I travel. One of the first churches I ever spoke in, 1992, was in Brownsville, Texas. Central Christian Church. Pastor Melvin Newland. It's been 22 years. I still remember his name. And this beautiful blonde, blue-eyed girl comes up to me and says, I got to tell you a story. I got to tell you a story. She was 18. I'm studying to be a veterinary doctor at the University of Texas in Austin. And, you know, if you're going to be a vet in Texas, you have to have a plane. Because vets have to fly. Texas is a big state. You got to fly around the state. So she was in a flying school. She meets the Saudi prince. Do you know what the first words of the Saudi prince were when he saw her? Will you marry me? Never spoke to him. He never spoke to her. The first words, will you marry me? So she said, listen, you know, I'm 18 and I'm still young and I've been driving a car since I was 16. And I'm learning to fly. And in Saudi Arabia, I can't drive a car and I can't fly a plane. Oh, you wouldn't have to. We have a chauffeur in a limousine. And we have first-class jet aircraft. You wouldn't have to fly. He said, well, I love cows and pigs and donkeys and dogs and cats. I want to be a vet. 1997, 5 years later, I'm back in the same church, and this girl comes up to me again. Oh, I got some more stories for you. Now I'm a doctor, she said. But I'm still studying one or two things to complete my thesis. And I go to the cafeteria. It's full of Muslim boys. And one guy comes up to me and says, will you marry me? He says, well, you know, I'm a vet. I drive a car. I fly a plane. Oh, you don't want to marry me? You see that guy over there, my friend? He'll marry you. Oh, you don't want to marry him? That guy, he'll marry you. These guys come with a budget to buy gold and silver and diamonds to woo and to court and to marry American women, to make them Muslim baby-producing factories, and to get passports. Do you understand why the Saudis were wrong when they said it's going to take 150 years? It's only going to take 30 years to make America Muslim? And it's all sugar-coated with money, money, money. And American Christian girls and American Jewish girls and American atheist girls are naive, don't have a clue. And these Muslim men, they are trained to do this. And everything's just wonderful until they get married. Okay. These are just simple little things I wanted to share with you. I'm watching the clock because I got to start wrapping up pretty soon. One little story I wanted to share, two little things I wanted to share with you. I spoke in Laredo, Texas. Laredo, Texas, United Baptist Church, Pastor Barrera, and they have an English language service and they have a Spanish language service. And I spoke in English and I spoke in Spanish. Wonderful people. Then we went out to eat and said, we have a story for you. One day we came to church Sunday morning, 8 in the morning, and we found a woman prostrate on the carpet praying. She was wet from the waist down. She had just waded across the Rio Grande River. So we spoke to her in Spanish. She was olive-colored skin, like Mexican. She didn't speak Spanish. She was Iranian. What happened? She was a Muslim. She came to the Lord, praise God. When her family found out she became a believer, they wanted to kill her. Luckily for her, she wasn't married. She came from a rich family. She had a passport. She had money. She bought a ticket to Paris, France. She flew to Paris. She got to Paris. She bought another ticket to Mexico City. Flew to Mexico City. Got off the plane. She hired a taxi driver, a coyote. How many people know what a coyote is? Coyote. These are the immigrants runners. And the Mexican taxi driver drove her to the Nuevo Laredo on the border, on the Rio Grande, 16-hour drive from Mexico City. Got there like 2, 3 in the morning. Said to the Iranian woman, there's the Rio Grande. You slide down the embankment, you wade across, it's up to your waist, you go up the embankment, you're home. She walked a few blocks on I-35. The door was open in the church. Sometimes people forget to lock the door. She went in to thank the Lord for salvation, for deliverance. And so they said to her, you can't just come into the United States like this. You have to surrender to the authorities. We'll vouch for you. They vouched for her. The happy end of the story, she got asylum. Now, if a single woman can just do that, what would you say about terrorists coming across from Mexico? I'm going to ask you a rhetorical, I don't want to say hypothetical. It's not hypothetical. I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question. Do you think or do you not think that they have tunnels under the border between Mexico and the United States? And I have news for you. I just came down from Florida. I just came down from, I'm already planning December, January, February. I just came down from Canada. And how many people know the road from Vancouver to Abbotsford skirts along the border? Do you know that there's no fence? You could walk across. There's no fence. And one of the ladies there in Canada said, oh, yes, we found a house on the Canadian side and a house on the American side, and there was a tunnel for smuggling drugs. Now, you tell me what's the difference between smuggling drugs and smuggling anti-aircraft missiles or nuclear weapon backpacks? Okay. Now, I'm going in for the final home stretch. I say there are 2 types of Islam. There's revolutionary and there's evolutionary. What I have described until now is the evolutionary, what they call the moderates. Is there such a thing as a moderate Muslim? Is there such a thing as a moderate Nazi? Is there such a thing as a moderate communist? Is there anything as a moderate Tojo fascist? There is no such thing as a moderate Muslim. You have revolutionary, evolutionary. The evolutionaries say, we do not want to destroy America. We want to buy it out and glorify Allah by buying out America and making it Muslim. We don't have to kill them yet. We will make them Muslim. And so I have described the plan of the moderates to do this. What I want to do now is I want to talk about the revolutionaries. Now, revolutionaries, I've got Sleeping in America and Legacy of Hate on the back table. I have a few things on the back table there, which we'll talk about 9/11. How many people know Oklahoma City was a Saddam Hussein bomb? This is in my first and third books. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols either converted to Islam or they were working with how many people heard of Ramzi Youssef? Ramzi Youssef built the bomb in New York City in 1993. He went to the Philippines and he organized the Abu Sayyaf terrorist group. Terry Nichols trained in Philippines with Ramzi Youssef. Need I say more? I was in Oklahoma City. I was in Tulsa when the bomb went off. This was not a Christian, Waco crazy militia bomb. Clinton said it was crazy Waco militiamen. The Christians got the bum rap from Bill Clinton. This was an Islamic bomb. Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein were behind it. Terry Nichols and Timothy McVeigh were part of it. It's in my Fanatic Islam, a Global Threat, in the Red Book, The Islamic Threat Updates. Everything is documented. TW-800, how many people think the plane just went down because of a fuel injection explosion? There were hundreds of people on the ground who saw the missile. How many people remember the name Pierre Salinger? Pierre Salinger interviewed the Air France captain who dodged the missile, evaded the missile, and then the missile went on to the next heat-emitting plane called TW-800. Saddam Hussein, the day before, said tomorrow's Iraq's Independence Day, we're going to give the United States a big surprise. This thing was planned by Saddam Hussein. I would need an hour to explain it. You know, the Shiites, backed by Iran, say that if America supports the Sunnis against Bashar al-Assad, the Shiites are going to launch sleeper attacks on American soil. The Sunnis say if America supports Iran and the Shiites, the Sunnis are going to launch sleeper cell attacks on American soil. How many people shut down the U.S. on 9/11? 19. You got 30 million Muslims in America. Soon you're going to have another 10, 20, 50 million Muslims coming in as these Islamic countries all collapse. The Muslims are going to be starving. The Middle East is depopulating itself. Is it the Jews who are doing it? Is it the Christians who are doing it? It's Allah. Remember Sarah Palin? Let Allah sort it out. Sarah Palin said Allah sorted it out. Muslims are killing each other. You're going to be getting tens of millions of Muslims. Canada knows it's going to get at least 10 million Muslims. Brazil is going to get, Mexico is going to get, Argentina is going to get. These are all countries full of natural resources and they need population. America will have 620 million people like Europe. The king of Saudi Arabia, or the kings of Saudi Arabia, believe that America can be taken over with money. And they're going to build millions of homes, tens of millions of homes for Muslims. When you have a building boom, the whole economy takes off. The dollar will be stronger than ever. The U.S. economy will be stronger than ever thanks to the Saudi money. That's the plan. What's the thorn in the side of the Saudis? What's the stick in the mud? ISIS. Now, you see, if you grow up in Saudi Arabia, if you're a male, and you go through the Wahhabi school system, jihad. You know, jihad is a word from Texas. Jihad. And you graduate high school in Saudi, and they give you a stipend. They give you a bunch of money. They say, go away. Go to Afghanistan. Go to Pakistan. Go to Syria. Go to Iraq. Go to Lebanon. Go wage jihad. And so a lot of these guys go off to war for Allah. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You know, after a while, people get tired. You know, it's called veterans. And these jihad veterans come back to Saudi Arabia. And what do they see? They see the hypocrisy of the king of Saudi Arabia and his family. They control all the money. You have 40% unemployment in Saudi Arabia. 40% unemployment. They have a very high suicide rate. Things are not going right in Saudi Arabia. They have like 19 million population, and they have 2 million Hindus and Catholics from the Philippines. Hindus are pagans, Catholics are infidels. Contaminating the holy soil of Islam. And so the Shiites, and also the ISIS people, say to the king of Saudi Arabia, you know, you have to be beheaded. The king of Jordan has to be beheaded. The king of Saudi Arabia has to be beheaded. The royal families have to be beheaded. You know why? 3 reasons. Reason number 1, these Saudis have so much money, and they go off to Europe, America, sometimes used to be Egypt, for gambling, drinking, and prostitution. You know, cannot get it at home. Then they come back to Saudi Arabia, they put on their holy garments, and all of a sudden they're holy rollers again. It's hypocrites. The Shiites are poor, pure, and Puritan, and so are the ISIS. Secondly, get rid of the slaves. Get rid of the Hindus, the 1 million Hindus, the 1 million Catholics. They contaminate the holy soil of Islam, of Mecca and Medina. Because the country is 20 million, they have 2 million slaves taking care of them. And here comes the crunch. The real reason the king of Saudi Arabia has to die and his family has to die, according to the ISIS and the Shiites, is because they are collaborators with Christianity. Now you see, what is the oxygen of the one world government economy? Oil. 2 weeks without oil, you cannot produce plastic. No plastic, no economy. The world basically has 2 weeks of reserves. Now, God willing, very soon America will have the Keystone pipeline. Canada, US will be totally self-sufficient. But you've got countries like China, India, Japan, many parts of Europe that are totally dependent on imports. And the price of oil is decided not by what US needs or Canada needs, it's decided by what the world needs. It's global village. And ISIS and the Shiites are saying that Saudi Arabia is perpetuating the Christian hegemony over Islam. And that the way to destroy Christianity, you have to destroy the economy. How do you destroy the Christian economy? You deny them the oil. So the logic of the Shiites of Iran, the logic of these ISIS, is to destroy the Saudi kingdom, destroy the collaborators with the West, destroy the oil wells. When you destroy the oil wells, you destroy the world economy. What happens when you destroy the world economy? How many people heard of David Wilkerson? Cities going up in flames. We just saw a sign just over an unfortunate incident in Missouri. Think for a moment how many billions of people will die of starvation, sickness, and chaos when the oil stops flowing. This is the perfect plan of the devil to kill human beings. I'm going to ask you another question. How many people think that there is a plan to depopulate the world by the one world government? Okay, now I disagree with that. Why do I disagree with it? Because the one world government, their God is mammon. Are you going to make more mammon or less mammon if you destroy the population of the earth? Destroying the population of the earth is one of the tree huggers' greatest ideas. Don't destroy the trees, destroy the people. But the one world government mammon people, they want more and more people to make more and more money. It's all about money. So I believe that the day is going to come that ISIS will attack and take over Jordan. And ISIS will attack and take over Saudi Arabia. And we're going to see the oil wells getting blown up unless the one world government says enough. As long as Islam participates in the one world government economy, which is the plan of the Saudi king, it's okay to have Islam tolerated. But when ISIS and the Shiites start blowing up the oil wells, no way, Jose. The harlot will dismount from the dragon and slaughter the dragon. Otherwise, the dragon will kill the harlot. That's the way I see it. I have 5 minutes, and I'm going to conclude with something which I want you all to think about. You know, the Six-Day War, how many people know that one of the names of Allah is Al-Makr? Al-Makr means Allah is the greatest of all the liars and deceivers. Ask any Muslim, Al-Makr. Wow, you're smart. How did you know that? You see, because in the Middle East, it's a virtue to lie. How many people heard of taqiyya? Taqiyya means you are commanded to lie to the infidel. Lying is a good thing in Islam, because Allah is the greatest of all the liars and deceivers. Six-Day War, Allah promised the victory to the Muslims. Who won the war? The Jews. So the Muslims in Israel and the Arab world said, you know what? We got to get rid of this liar God, Allah, and go over to the God of truth, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who's the God of the Jews and the Christians. Who ruined it all? Moshe Dayan. Moshe Dayan comes with the keys to the Temple Mount. Let's make peace. Now, Moshe Dayan, I'm not going to criticize him. Moshe Dayan understood realities. We had miracles in the Six-Day War. And we were outnumbered 100 to 1 by the end of the war. It was so fast that Muslims didn't know what happened to them. Outnumbered 100 to 1. What does Jesus say? Who is the king who goes to war with 10,000 men against the king with 20,000 men? How many people know that verse in the Bible? Not too many hands go up. But it goes together with the other parable. Who is the man who builds a tower without first counting the cost? How many people know that one? Lest people say he started to build and he couldn't finish. So the parable, which is parallel, is who is the king with 10,000 who goes to war against the king with 20,000? Maybe better to send an ambassador of peace. This is what Dayan did. What did Winston Churchill say? He said magnanimous in victory. Israel's trying to be magnanimous in victory. We extended the olive branch. We won, fair and square, let's make peace. You know how the Muslims understood it? Aha! Allah is the greatest of all the liars and deceivers because he even deceived Moshe Dayan. We're sticking with Allah. That's the Muslim mentality. And so I'm predicting, and don't try to get out of my mouth that I'm saying that I want to blow up the black stone in Mecca, the Kaaba. ISIS said they're going to do it. How many people heard ISIS said they're going to blow up the black stone in Mecca? Because the black stone is a pagan symbol. And Muhammad co-opted the pagan symbol into Islam. ISIS are purists. They want to get rid of the black stone. But you get rid of the black stone, you get rid of Islam. Because the Muslims go around the black stone 7 times. It's part of the Hajj. When the black stone goes, Islam goes because it's the end of Islam. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And I'm predicting the day's going to come, one way or another, that black stone is going to be destroyed. Islam is going to be defeated. And if you ask me when, I'd say tomorrow. Because ISIS could take over Saudi Arabia at any time. We have a professor in Israel, Amatzia Baram. They were asking him, what happens if ISIS takes over Jordan? He says Israel has a problem because most of the Jordanians support ISIS. Most of the Saudis support ISIS because they all know the king and his family are corrupt. ISIS are purists. ISIS is a popular movement among the Sunnis. And like I said, when they start blowing up the oil wells to harm the Christians, they're cutting off their own nose to spite their faces. And the one world government is not going to tolerate it. And so I believe Islam will be terminated not by the Jews and the Christians. Islam will be terminated by the harlot, by the one world government. Then they'll come to the Jews after it's all done. Now you can build your temple, if you get the gist. Wait a second. If you're talking about Christian theology, once you have a temple, what do you have after that? The Antichrist. And if you ask me, when is that going to be? It won't be tomorrow, but it'll be the day after tomorrow. We are living in the most remarkable times. Messiah is really, really around the corner. And I will conclude with Numbers 6 in Hebrew and in English. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May the Lord bless thee and keep thee. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yuchuneka. May the Lord cause his countenance to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. Isaha Adonai panav elecha v'yasehem lecha shalom. Amen. And may the Lord turn his face unto thee and grant thee peace. Amen.